What is an illegal thing most people don't know is illegal. To add a little to this, in most cities, it isn't about contaminating drinking water. It is either to protect the treatment plant or the downstream freshwater. For urban wastewater plants, usually biological technology, anything non-biodegradable may not be treated and thus contaminate the freshwater at the outlet. Anything toxic coming in could damper or damage the plant's biological treatment process. Drinking water comes from a different treatment plant upstream of the wastewater treatment outlet. That's what confused me when I first visited my family in the States. They had separate mailboxes for their newspaper deliveries. I always assumed it was some weird kind of advertising on marketing for the newspaper, as the mailboxes were branded with the newspaper's name. Nope, it's legal thing. The main mailbox can only be used by the USPS. In fact, I believe that even though you buy the mailbox yourself, it's still considered the property of the USPS. This is generally the same in the UK also. The basic gist is that as an item that is carried for self-defense is a weapon which indicates premeditation and is no longer self-defense. If I'm attacked, I'm going to use this to harm an attacker. However, you can carry items which could be used as a weapon if the primary purpose is a tool which you can justify having for the specific scenario, such as going fishing and having a filleting knife. Edit, grammar. And North Carolina. Having sex between the beds in a hotel, motel. First of all, I would thank you all for your upvotes and awards. Had no idea this would blow up. Second of all, just wanted to let you know that I'm in the process of diving down the rabbit hole trying to validate this law. I remember reading about it years ago in a book of lists. One of the lists was top 10 strange U.S. state laws. And this was one of them. Now the only immediate reference I can find to the wording that I typed was from this clickbait site. Diving deeper, the only NC law I can find that references sex in hotels is at CGS 14-186, which makes it illegal for unmarried couples to occupy a hotel room for immoral purposes. Now it gets tricky. Apparently, this law was challenged in 1978, in State versus Sanders. It was determined that the term immoral was too vague to form a solid prosecution, and the case was dismissed. Now this is just supposition on my part, but it seems that the language that defined immoral may have been contained in NCGS 14-185, and NCGS 14-187. Both of these statutes were repealed in 1975. 3 years before the 1978 case. There doesn't seem to be an easy way to find repealed statutes online. Lol. Best hope may be to dig up someone's old law library. With a hard copy of NC General Statutes printed before 1975. Anyway, all I can say is sorry. LOL. I guess you can't always trust old paperback list books and clickbait sites, but it was a fun little quest to try and source this. Good night everyone, and thanks again. In Scotland, you cannot pick up roadkill that you killed with your own car. However, the car behind you can pick it up and do whatever with it. Edit to add. This is partially the same with foxes. It is illegal to intentionally look for foxes to kill. Usually it's a group of hunters with dogs that chase after the foxes. You're not allowed to kill them on purpose. But if your dog goes and gets one, it's fair play. Paralegal here. If a 16-year-old girl sends a nude selfie to her 16-year-old boyfriend, she has produced and distributed child pornography. If he does not know what she sent and opens it and immediately deleted it, he is not guilty of receiving child pornography. If he asks for a pic, he is guilty of soliciting child pornography. If he sees it and then downloads it, he is guilty of possession of child pornography. If they are adjudicated as adults, they will have to register as sex offenders for the rest of their life. Full text: https://statutes.capitol.texas.gov/docs/htm/.43.htm number 43.23 f A person who possesses 6 or more obscene devices or identical or similar obscene articles is presumed to possess them with intent to promote the same, essentially unenforceable since 2008, per U.S. District Court, Texas Penal Code Sections 43.23. To the extent that it applies to obscene devices as defined in Texas Penal Code Section 43.21a, 7, is declared to be facially unconstitutional and unenforceable throughout the state of Texas, building on Lawrence v. Texas. While the law was really about presumption to sell, Cruz fought to preserve it and as it applied to all. https://www.motherjones.com/politics/2016/04/Ted Cruz dildo ban sex devices Texas/ Not quite. https://www.animalaud.info/statute/shield dangerous animals and aquatic life reptiles Herps Act. T's actually against the law to have over $600 worth of salamanders, with the value being defined as $5 or the fair market value, whichever is greater. I don't know how much salamanders cost nowadays, but it could be well above $5. Also note, this only applies to wild indigenous reptiles and amphibians. It's to allow first responders more ways to act. From my understanding, this is an often repeated myth. I mean, it also just makes no sense in the face of it. Say a child is shouting for help inside a locked room. Is the officer allowed to kick the door down then? Do we have to make it illegal for a child to shout? The reason almost certainly has more to do with religious prohibitions of suicide. This has ancient roots. For example, a criminal ordinance issued by Louis XIV in 1670 was far more severe in its punishment. The dead person's body was drawn through the streets, face down, and then hung or thrown on a garbage heap. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/suicide_legislation. Obviously Louis XIV wasn't caring about whether it was legal to kick down a door. With the recent crackdown on phone usage in Japan, I thought this was false, but after searching in Japanese it turns out it's true. Phones may be operated in cars that have come to a complete stop. This means pulling over to the side of the road, but also stopping at lights. Horns can only be used to avoid a dangerous situation, so being held up because someone isn't moving isn't dangerous. So technically it's illegal. At my old college, cops in cars would routinely pull over students riding on bikes, for the dumbest shit too. And not even on campus. On major roads, just an excuse to see if they're drunk, I guess. Even on weekday mornings. Likewise, they pulled over anyone with the headlight out and immediately breathalyzed them. Didn't have to be driving badly or swerving, just a headlight out. I got pulled over 4 times in the 2 days it took me to replace the bulb. California law stating that it is illegal to wash your neighbor's car without their permission. Also, in San Francisco and Long Beach here you cannot store anything other than an automobile in your garage. Edit: this is no longer a law, ordinance in Long Beach anymore. The SF1 is for commercial structures only, but at one point it definitely was illegal to use your garage as anything other than a parking spot for your car. People could do stuff like rent out their garage, tax-free. I've posted about this before. This is technically true, but not because Arizona lawmakers felt like they had to protect the whales. It's because whale hunting is federally illegal. Also, many states have their own laws that basically say anything on this list, such as a federally maintained endangered animals list, is illegal to hunt without bothering to carve out exceptions for the ones that aren't found in that state. In many jurisdictions, the law requires that drivers come to a complete stop before entering a road from a parking lot, an alley, a private driveway, or a parking ramp. It's to be treated as if there were a stop sign, even though one may not be present. I recently had the pleasure of proving my wife wrong on this point. She was adamant that stopping wasn't required unless there's a sign. I won the bet and she had to cook supper that night. stopping forward of the white line or stop sign at an intersection. You can creep forward to see if you're clear to go after you've come to a full and complete stop before the line. I used to work in surveillance. During a sting operation with local Leos, they pulled someone for rolling a stop sign because they wanted to search her car. I called BS on the officer in the control room. He explained to me that technically she ran the stop sign because she didn't stop before. They use it all the time. Several years later, I was studying for my class a CDL and ran across that rule again in my book. 2 unrelated sources, 1 a published book. One thing about stopping before the white line or a crosswalk is that it communicates to through traffic that you are driving with due care and attention. Every time I see someone stop after the lines, I tend to get very anxious, especially if they are looking the other way. Do they see me? Do they even intend to stop? I usually slow down hard when I see that. Following the traffic laws communicates to other drivers that you are a relatively safe and predictable road user. It contributes to the overall well-being of all road users and lowers the levels of stress, road rage, and accidents. Got a funny and stupid story about copyright bullshit in relation to that. So I like to collect diecast model airplanes. I usually get things I've seen or at least one model from some of the larger or more obscure airlines out there. Most airlines could give two shits about dinky little model airplanes being produced in an unlicensed manner, but there are a few who will sick their lawyer teams on any brand who produces models of their planes. For a company like Cathay Pacific, it makes sense. They have a contract with Herp the Wings and their subsidiaries to produce models specifically for their online shop, but the quality is shit and people would much prefer getting the unlicensed models instead. Not to mention officially licensed models cost a fortune. A Phoenix Cathay 747 would go now for probably $75 Canadian, while a Excitement 747 would easily soar over $120 Canadian. Nobody wants to pay either really. But people especially don't want the official model because it's half plastic while the unlicensed is completely made out of metal. There's quite a few airlines who care about who makes models of their planes because that's revenue lost to another company that they won't see a share of. ANA, JAL, Cathay, Eva Air, Singapore Air, those are the ones I know for sure get their panties in a knot when unlicensed models are produced. So manufacturers work around it. They don't put the brand or the airline's name on the outer boxes now. It'll be one or the other plus what aircraft type it is. Or the manufacturers will create a new brand so if legal action is taken against them, the main brand won't suffer the consequences. Also, online shops list those airlines as miscellaneous so they don't get into trouble for selling them either. Another tactic they use is to slightly alter the colors on the models. Then they can say, oh, this isn't Eva Air. Eva uses field green but this model is forest green, not the same at all. A lot of places are starting to allow marijuana especially for medicinal purposes, but that doesn't mean you can smoke it in public. I was on a float trip this weekend in southern Missouri where medical marijuana is legal now. Cops were, literally, hiding in bushes along the river giving people who were floating on rafts tickets for smoking in public. Even people with medical marijuana licenses. There's quite a few hold-over laws in Bangladesh. They are generally not enforced anymore, but the government still reserves the right to enforce them if they feel like it. For instance, if a person gets run over by an ox cart, or has a collision with an ox, he will be kicked out of the city's municipal corporation, because anyone who could collide with something as slow-moving as an ox cart is apparently just faking it and disrupting traffic and so does not have the right to live in a city. The law, Turk, has origins dating back to the Mughal period and stayed throughout the British Raj and Pakistani era and no one saw it necessary to change or fix it. You can go to Lowe's and buy weed killer off the shelf and use it on your property. You can use it on your parents' property. If you use it on your neighbor's property and he gives you $20, that's a felony. Edit because the same smart-ass replies keep coming up. Treating according to label instructions for friends and family without compensation does not qualify as a business activity most places. If you do this and receive compensation, then you're conducting business, and under the law you should have a commercial applicator's license. This is mostly an example of a badly written law that is too open-ended. I don't know anyone who has gotten any real legal trouble over an unlicensed jug of Roundup, but they could. Oh yeah, in my country, lots of stuff are fair game. Back in the 90s, on holiday in the US, my parents needed a painkiller, then oh why, and they barely got their hands on an aspirin. A note on traveling abroad: when asked about what meds you're carrying with you, start off with birth control. I arrived in Australia carrying that and painkillers, all by the book, nothing to hide, and when asked that, I said birth control and the agent went like, I don't wanna hear it, carry on. This is one most regular people don't ever have to worry about, but structuring. What is structuring? Well, there is a law that most people have probably at least heard of if they've watched cop shows, where any transaction of $10,000 or more banks are required to report. This is just routine, and if you're not up to anything nefarious, it's not a big deal. People that are trying to be shady, say with evading taxes, though they may try to get around this by just making a bunch of smaller deposits, like $9,975, $9,899, etc. Well, it turns out the feds thought of that. If you go around deliberately structuring transactions specifically to evade reporting, that's illegal. Importing Kinder Surprise eggs to the US from your trip abroad. You won't go to jail, but if you are unlucky and the customs agent is not very lenient, you can face a fine for every egg you tried to smuggle in. According to some sources, the fine per egg could go up to $2,500, but I couldn't find a case where someone was actually fined that much. The most I could find in my 5-minute research was a Canadian woman who got fined $300 Canadian for trying to bring in one egg. I guess in most cases the customs agents will just confiscate the eggs and give you a warning. That's not quite true. Piracy is illegal because it is distributing copyrighted material without permission, compensation to the owner. It's not the downloading that's illegal, it's the uploading. With VPN services, they all absolutely have their lawyers vet everything they put in an advertisement before they tell Uber to say it. It's not illegal to use a VPN to bypass country restrictions, but it is almost definitely against the toes of the streaming provider, and they are well within their rights to block your account if you do. No, that's not piracy. Piracy is when you make unauthorized copies, with or without edits, or public performances of copyrighted works. Netflix is intentionally making a copy, or performance, with permission from the copyright holders. You aren't doing much of anything in this scenario. Simply viewing or using a copyrighted work does not require permission, regardless of what lies you may have read in software EULAs. Big campaign here in Australia. Whilst driving, you even touch your phone in the car, even if it's in a cradle, you get $1,000 fine and license demerit point. If you are a passenger and you distract the driver with the phone, also a fine. There are new phone and seatbelt cameras and traffic lights to photograph those using phones or not wearing seatbelts. If you have a learner driver under your instruction, same rules apply as if you are driving. I was living in Hawaii and went out with a friend to some bars. The police had the street blocked off to traffic, but we were threatened with a jaywalking ticket if we didn't turn around and go use the crosswalk when we had already crossed 90% of the width of the street. Looking back, I wish I had called that jackass officer on his bluff. Few pics of the street blocked off and I'm certain a judge would have waived that ticket. To be honest, I don't blame someone on a bike for not wanting to be on the road with cars. That's not to say that it doesn't suck to be a pedestrian slammed into by a speeding bike. Asshole indeed. And in a city where sidewalks are crowded, riding a bike is not cool. But in the suburbs, if a cyclist on a sidewalk uses common sense and courtesy, like not going that fast, passing around slower pedestrians, giving them room, and calling out on your left, right, It doesn't bother me. I'll share a little sidewalk so they don't have to be flattened by a car driven by someone changing the radio station or checking Reddit responses on their smartphone. Ideally, bikes would have their own sidewalk lane, but we know that's not a practical answer in a world where many neighborhoods don't even have sidewalks for pedestrians. A separate bike lane in the street is a solution if it's bordered by those floppy plastic posts. At least it makes a noise when a distracted driver swerves into them, hopefully waking them up. A bike lane demarcated only by a painted line won't be much help in sparing the cyclist from a brief lapse of driver attention. Just saying.